Most of us are cooking at home a lot more these days, going to the store, picking up the most picture-perfect foods. And if we don't eat them soon enough, and they start to go a little less than perfect, we probably just toss them out in the trash. Imagine this on a huge scale, and partner that image with all the people out there who are in need of high-quality food. I'm Courtney Drake McDonough, your host for the In Good Taste Denver podcast and publisher of the In Good Taste Denver blog. My guest today is Arlan Preblud, who is the founder and executive director of We Don't Waste. Arlan, thank you so much for joining me by phone today so we can learn more about what We Don't Waste is all about.
Well, thank you, Courtney. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit more about what We Don't Waste's mission is.
Sure. The mission of We Don't Waste is to recover all the unused food from in the metropolitan Denver area and then redistribute that food to food pantries, food banks, congregate feeding sites, and through our mobile food markets that we operate.
Wonderful. So how and when did it get started?
We Don't Waste got started back in 2009. I had researched things for about 6 months and then finally began operating in September of 2009. So we've been around a little over 11 years.
Wow. So what led you to start it?
Well, my wife and I had volunteered over the course of several years at various nonprofits in the community. And then when the recession hit in 2008 and we were continuing to volunteer, I noticed that some of the agencies that we were working with were having difficulty providing food to their clients. And so both of us being foodies, we ate out a lot. In those days, you could eat out a lot, as opposed to today. And I began asking the restaurateurs that I knew, I said, what do you do with the food that's left over at the end of the night if you don't sell it all? And they generally said that they had to throw it away because they didn't really have what to do with it. And I said to them, would you mind donating that product? And they said, of course not. We would love to be able to do that because, as you know, chefs and cooks hate to throw out food. So once I was able to get several of these restaurateurs to agree to donate it, I then went to some of the nonprofits that I had connections with, and I said, would you be willing to take this food if I could provide it? And they said, absolutely. So that was the beginning of this project. And from there, it took me 6 to 8 months to really figure out a business plan and put things together and finally begin operating it.
What were you doing professionally at that point?
I had practiced law for a good number of years, and when the recession hit, I was a sole practitioner, and I had practiced for too many years and decided that I wasn't going to fight this financial upheaval, and I was looking for something else to do rather than just completely retire, and that was the idea that came to my mind, and that's what led to the start of We Don't Waste.
Wow. So does We Don't Waste only function in Colorado, or is it elsewhere?
Well, it functions strictly in Colorado, all along the Front Range. We do deliver through a partnership to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. This came about when, now I guess it's been about 7 or 8 years ago. Somebody found us and indicated that the reservation was really in dire straits for food and wanted to know if we'd take food up there. Well, that's a little bit further than we normally travel. And so we eventually worked out an arrangement where a church that supports the reservation in Loveland would come down to our facility and we would load up between 40 and 50,000 servings of food once or twice a month, and then they would take that up to the reservation in South Dakota. But with COVID, the reservation is effectively shut down, so we're unable to provide any food up to the reservation. But once COVID is over, I'm sure we'll begin again supplying food to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. But we strictly currently operate in Colorado.
Okay. So with people who aren't familiar with everything you do, talk a little bit more about all the various places. I know you talked about restaurants, but I know there are other places where you obtain food from and the condition it's in, because I'd imagine, like, to be honest, when I first heard about We Don't Waste and what you did, there's a little bit of a, food that didn't get used, thrown out food. What are you talking about? So can you explain what that is and how that works and why it's not a gross, weird thing?
No, it's not that at all. And just to be clear, we're not taking food off of people's plates that didn't finish their meal. That's not at all what we do. We go further up the food chain, basically, to determine what food we do get. And we get food from various sources. I'll give you one example. We get food from a produce aggregator. This is a company about 15, 20 miles outside of Denver that aggregates a fresh product, fruits and vegetables and the like, and they package it and then they deliver it out to hotels, restaurants, supermarkets, and the like. And to give you a real good example from that particular food donor, seasonally they get a lot of bell peppers. And the bell peppers come in 3 basic shades: yellow, red, and green. So if you look at a normal bell pepper in the produce section of your supermarket, it'll have 4 chambers. Well, some bell peppers grow with only 3 chambers. And some food distributors and supermarkets will only take bell peppers that have 4 chambers. So when they're packing these, if it has 3 chambers, the people on the line that are sorting will throw the 3-chamber bell pepper into an area designated for the landfill. Likewise, if they're sorting yellow bell peppers and there's a little more green in it than's acceptable, landfill. If it's red and it's got some green or yellow, landfill. Well, when we came to them, we said, look, we would really like to do business with you. And so they became a tremendous source of not only bell peppers, but other produce that has similar issues. There's nothing wrong with the bell pepper. I defy you to take a 3-chamber bell pepper, cut it up, and then take a 4-chamber bell pepper and cut it up. They taste absolutely the same. And unless you're so particular that you can't stand a bell pepper with a little discolor, there's no reason why you can't use a yellow bell pepper that has a little green in it. So that's one example of all the product that we would get. They also get product from dairy producers. They may have an excess. They may do a run on, say, yogurt, and for one reason or another, they overrun it, and they have extra, and they can't sell it. Because, as I'm sure your listeners know, many of the products that are in the supermarkets have sell date, best by date, or use by dates on the product. Now, those are really nothing but marketing tools. None of the agencies or entities that govern our food supply mandate that a clamshell of lettuce greens has to have a sell date of X. But the producers and the stores, they want the freshest product they can have on their shelves. So if a clamshell of, say, salad greens has a sell date of less than 5 days, then the supermarket, first of all, won't take it, and it has to then end up in the landfill. Well, that clamshell of greens is good. After 5 days, it's not going to disintegrate. It's not going to turn bad. That's what the producer and the store have determined is the best date for that product. We get protein from a food donor up in Boulder that does a large business with sausage and bacons and the like. And sometimes in their research kitchens, they may do a run, and it's supposed to be hickory smoke, whatever, right? It may add a little too much hickory to it, and they can't sell that, but it's still good. It's packaged correctly. It'll withstand all the tests, and so they'll call us and say, hey, can you use this? And we absolutely say, certainly you can. So those are some of the ways that we obtain product, and we're always looking for more product to meet the demand.
Is there any kind of food you don't take?
We don't take product that doesn't, one, travel well, or if it's been damaged in some way. 40% of the food that we produce in this country never gets to the market, nor is never consumed. So you take that amount of product product and realized that if you could somehow or other acquire all of that product, we could probably reduce the amount of individuals who are faced with food insecurity substantially. And on the other end of it, we're doing things to protect the planet, because all of the product that we recover would normally go to the landfill. Well, 23% of the methane gas that's generated in landfills is the result of food that has been put into the landfill. So you take the amount that's never used, and you can see readily just how unfortunate it is for the planet to have to deal with food that is better used in our bellies than in the landfill. We often get calls and people want to know, well, where can I pick up food? Our policy is that we deliver to community-based agencies. Those are nonprofits in the community that either operate a food pantry, a food bank, or a congregate feeding site. So we have directly that we supply food about 90 of those agencies throughout the metropolitan Denver area. Then we provide another 130 through partner distributions. And let me explain what a partner distribution is. So if we deliver, say, to the Adams County Food Bank, they in turn supply smaller food pantries in their general area. So they're getting the product from us, and then they turn around and they distribute it to agencies within their geographical area. We also then run mobile food markets. This is a concept that I started back in March of 2019. My team, we did some research, and we found that in Denver alone, there are about 50 food deserts. Pardon me. Food deserts are defined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture as geographic areas that are economically depressed and don't have a supermarket or a grocery store within anywhere from a half a mile to a mile. So there are 50 in Denver. We then plotted those, and then we overlaid the mapping with the agencies that we do deliver, and we found that there were areas within the city that we just weren't touching. And it might be because there wasn't a community-based agency we could partner in an area, or it was too small, or they weren't inclined to operate a food pantry. But initially, in March of 2019, we selected the Glowville, Elyria, Swansea area. I don't know if you're so familiar with that. Mm-hmm. That's the area around the stockyards on both the north and south side of I-70, which is now being impacted by the C-70 project to improve I-70 from I-25 out to Pena Boulevard. So we went in there and we partnered with two community-based agencies. One is a resource center, a family-focused resource center on one side of the highway, and on the other side is Garden Place Academy, which is a K-5 Denver public school. The school has about an 85% free and reduced lunch program within the school, so we knew that we would be hitting a targeted audience. And what we did, we set up two mobile food markets, one on each site, and we operated those, and we set them up as farmers markets. Generally, when people that are food insecure and having a difficult time go to a food pantry, they're generally handed a bag and it has product in it, and they take that product home. Sometimes they're very fortunate and they can use all the product. Oftentimes it's product that they don't know what it is, or they don't know how to prepare it, or they don't like it. And where does that food go? It goes into the trash. Mm-hmm. So we decided that we were going to operate these mobile markets so that people could shop with dignity. We put the food out in displays on banquet-type tables, and the line forms, and people go through, and they literally pick and choose what they want. They can take as much of the product that we have. The only time we limit any product is if, for instance, we're handing out protein. So we might say, okay, one turkey per family. But otherwise, they can take as much food as they want. And those were very, very successful until March of 2020 when COVID hit. So we had to pivot rather quickly. In fact, we did it within a week. And we converted each of those to mobile markets, to drive-through mobile markets. And what we did, we took the locations. We had volunteers that came to us, and we packaged the food that we were going to distribute into grocery bags or boxes. And then we take all that food out to the location. We set it up, covered by tents. And we have, I mentioned this, but we have 4 refrigerated trucks. One is particularly outfitted so it can deal with the mobile markets. And we set it up, and with the use of volunteers, we hand out the product rather than, unfortunately, having people shop. So that's some of the ways that we distribute food throughout the city.
Wow.
in the metropolitan Denver area.
Very impressive. So, is there a cost involved to anyone along the chain? Because I'm trying to understand how all of this operates.
Sure, a really good question, and that is we don't charge to pick up the food from our food donors, and we don't charge our recipient agencies or people that go through the drive-through mobile food markets for the food at all. It's all free to each and every one of the individuals that benefits from this food.
Okay, so where do you get your funding from to operate?
That's even a better question. We are supported by numerous foundations, both locally and throughout the United States, that we apply for grants from. We get support from corporate partners that also assist us. Individuals are very important to us in their donations to We Don't Waste. And then we put on events. And for the last 8 years, we were putting on an event called Fill a Plate for Hunger. And we did that at Denver's Botanic Gardens. And we did that, as I said, for 8 years up until this year. And unfortunately, because of the restrictions of COVID, we're unable to do that. So we converted that to a virtual event, which we produced in September of this year. Then we also do other events throughout the year where we involve people, and we had a program last year at the Stanley Marketplace called Construction, where we got architectural and engineering firms to build designs made out of canned goods. So they built all different kinds of designs, and then all of the canned goods that they used to build these designs, that food was donated to us so that we could turn around and distribute it to our agencies. So that's how we get supported.
I saw that. That was a really fun and very visual way to do things. That was a great project. You talked a little bit about the effect of COVID and how you were able to pivot, the word of the year, so quickly for the mobile markets. But talk a little bit about how the ways in which COVID has affected other things, because, the restaurants aren't producing what they were. So how else has COVID affected things for you?
From day one, it really began to affect us in different ways. First of all, you mentioned the restaurants. When the restaurants had to shut down in March, they had no place to go with their food, and they had no idea how long they were going to be closed. So they called us, and we were literally inundated with food for about 4 to 6 weeks. We got food from restaurants. Prior to COVID, we recover all the food out of Mile High Stadium, from the Pepsi Center, which is now the Can Arena, from the Convention Center, from Coors Field, and from Dick's Sporting Goods. We got food from all of those facilities on a regular basis. Well, initially we got the food because they weren't able to get rid of the food, and that was really nutritious and wholesome food. But then as things began to level out, we found that the uphill logistics of the food supply chain changed substantially, because after a while, the food producers and the wholesalers and the distributors realized that they couldn't continue to produce and distribute the quantities they were distributing, whether it was to restaurants or hotels or venues or wherever food is sold or delivered. So they began to cut back. Well, that certainly impacted us because they didn't have a lot of the excesses that they had in the past that we relied on. But we work really closely with our network of food donors to maintain and establish new delivery opportunities with these food donors. On the other end of the spectrum, the demand has increased incredibly high. We estimate that our demand for food through our various distributions has increased by a factor of about 300% with COVID. When you take into account, starting with the restaurants, all the people that were laid off from restaurants, all the people from all the venues that were laid off, and the people that lost jobs, their incomes were shut off. And in spite of the fact that the CARES Act provided them with some money, it certainly didn't replace what their salaries were. So they were short of dollars. Their rent continued until there was this reprieve on evictions, but their utilities continued to be things that they needed. Their kids were now home, and they weren't getting fed at schools, so they were in a pinch. And the pinch was, where and how are we going to maintain our families with food? So where were they going to go? Well, they visited our mobile markets. They visited all the food pantries and food banks that we distribute to. So the demand has increased while the ability to meet that demand is very challenging.
Yeah. But before COVID, I'm not quite sure how to phrase this question, but about like what percentage did you feel of need you were meeting for people before COVID?
Before COVID?
Yeah.
That's a good question, and it's a difficult one for us to evaluate, and I'll tell you why. We rely on the numbers that are provided by the food pantries and the food banks and the congregate feeding sites that we support, because we're not directly handling food to a family that's coming into a food pantry. But we estimate, and over the years we've been, I think, pretty accurate, that we probably touch about 300,000 people a year.
And any idea of that compared to need? You know, how much were you able to really make a dent in the overall need here in Colorado?
I think it's substantial, you know. Currently, 1 in 3 kids are food insecure under the COVID program. Mm-hmm. It used to be 1 in 6. There's a factor of about 18% of the population in the state of Colorado is food insecure. And that continues to grow, unfortunately. But that's a substantial number when you look at the population. And obviously, all of those situations are not fully reported, but it's a major problem in this country. One only has to look at the local news or listen to podcasts or wherever you get your information and see how many food bank lines are being operated throughout the country. Now, granted, those are all increased by the fact of COVID, but if you take the COVID impact out of it, there's still a huge percentage of the population that is food insecure in this country when we're throwing away 40% of the food.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how many people are behind We Don't Waste activities, both in terms of staff and volunteers?
Sure. Currently we have a staff of 14, and we've grown considerably. You know, when I first started back in 2009, it was me and a Volvo station wagon. Then I graduated to a 180,000-mile van that had seen its better days. And as I said, we've increased initially from 2009 till 2017. All of the food that we recovered had to be distributed out the same day because we had no warehousing. We had no refrigeration to accommodate that. Then in 2017, we secured a facility that's 11,000 square feet in size, that has 1,000 square feet of cooler space, soon to have 1,000 square feet of freezer space. And the staff, as I said, is 14. Currently, we use volunteers that come in and they package the food in these grocery bags and boxes for distribution. So we average, I think, in a given year, between 300 and 400 volunteers that work with us. And the nice thing about it is they come, they work, and then they want to come back and work again. So it's really pleasing to us that we have such committed people working with us.
Definitely. What's some of the variety of things that volunteers do for you?
Sure. So as I said, under normal conditions, when we could have a group of volunteers inside the facility, they would sort product. For instance, we get a lot of product from a company that delivers meals to people that purchase their meal plan, and they deliver that out. I'm sure you may be familiar with Blue Apron. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a similar organization in Colorado that does that. We pick up from them because they have excess. And so we use volunteers that go through these gaylords that we receive that have individually packaged onions or bell peppers, or and maybe they'll have asparagus and they'll have green beans, but they're packaged for an individual family. Mm-hmm. So we'll aggregate those and we'll put them out for people that go through the mobile food market or in delivering it to various agencies. So they'll do that. Currently, we don't permit them to come into the warehouse because we're social distancing, but we set up tents in our parking lot, and people come twice a week and they sort the product and put it into grocery bags and boxes so that we can do that, make it available to people that go through the mobile markets. The other times we use volunteers is, in the past at least, with our Fill a Plate for Hunger, we've had volunteers that assist us in setup and acting as ambassadors and assisting at the event. We also bring in volunteers at times to help us with mailings and the like. So we try to make it an experience for them. We have a video session with each group of volunteers that explains what we do and what the process is and how to do things safely. So we're looking to always increase our availability with volunteers and exciting and rewarding experience for them.
Where do you see We Don't Waste going in the next few years, assuming, COVID comes to an end sooner rather than later?
Well, let's hope it does end sooner rather than later. But as far as We Don't Waste goes, I think that unfortunately, We Don't Waste is going to be around a lot longer than probably I am. People say, well, what's your best wish for We Don't Waste? And my answer to that is I'd like to wake up tomorrow morning and know that I could shut it down. And they say, well, why would you want to do that? Well, because if I could shut it down, that means that we've solved the problem of food insecurity. There's too many issues surrounding food insecurity and poverty that's not going to happen anytime soon, because we have to really educate the population as to what is appropriate to do with food that is not as beautiful as people might want it. A lot of the food that we get is because it doesn't appeal to one's sense of perfection. But I tell the story about the crooked carrot. A crooked carrot tastes the same as a straight carrot. Mm-hmm. The only difference is it's bent. Well, if you chop it up or even just chew it up, trust me, it tastes the same as that straight carrot. And there are so many other examples of product that is just as good, but it doesn't have the eye appeal that we like cucumbers that may have too many bumps on it, or squash that's not perfect. I don't know what a perfect squash is anymore. But as far as We Don't Waste, I think that we are constantly looking at our strategic plan and our growth pattern, and I think what we have to do is become more visible in the community, one. Two, we're probably going to expand our mobile food markets, because it's become apparent to me that a lot of people have difficulty getting from point A to point B in order to shop at a food pantry or the food bank. And by their very operation, are kind of limited in what they could do. But we may have to, currently, we have a 26-foot truck that we load up with pallets, and we go out to a site and we unload it. We may have to go to an alternative type method of transportation where we have a vehicle that is on two sides is open. So people, it'd be on a smaller basis, so we cover small areas of the city, but we could drive into a neighborhood park and let people shop off the sides of the truck with various products that we put on display. And I think, we're poised to be very successful. We have good financial support in the community, which is always a necessity. And we just have to be more nimble in how we provide the product that we have, because, 50% of the product we put out is fresh fruits, vegetables, lean protein, and dairy. So it's healthy food. It's food that people need to be nourished and healthy. Food insecurity is the step threshold of poverty. If you solve the problem of food insecurity, then you're giving people an opportunity to improve their lives. And really, that's what we're looking to do overall.
There's just so much education involved in everything you're doing, from changing people's mindset about what looks perfect and, and edible and the need.
You bring up this point about education. We've just recently started a program within our operation where we had some interns from Johnson & Wales, and we asked them if they could do cooking shows for us. So this one young lady who has worked with us, she said she'd be happy to do that. So we began filming at a company that sells all kinds of restaurant equipment, and they have a fully set up kitchen, which was just perfect for us. So we began filming this intern making dishes, okay? And what we intend to do is put those out into schools, put them on YouTube, so that individuals can see how easy it is to take product and turn it into something that's really good. And the last one I saw was vegetable stew. And it's really, to me, it looked pretty simple, but maybe that's because the instructor made it look so simple. But you chop up the onions and the potatoes and the bell peppers, and you put them into a pot with some chicken stock, add some water, and then some garbanzo beans, and you cook it until it looks terrific. And it didn't take very long to do that. So we're going to explore that opportunity and try to provide recipes to the people that we work with and help them to better nourish their families.
Right. Yeah. I know, like you said, you sometimes get items that aren't familiar to them, and to be handed a recipe or to know that you'll be shown a way to prepare that would make a big difference and open their eyes and their family's eyes to a new vegetable,
Sure.
for example. Yeah.
I remember the first time we got kale. We tried to hand it out, and people looked and said, "This looks like weeds. What is this?" And so we got a hold of a video, and it showed how you take the kale and you cut it up and you put it in a saute pan with a little olive oil, and you saute it and add a little onion, and it looks entirely different than what you'd see grocery store.
Yeah.
But when you go to taste it, it tastes really good. So those are the kinds of things that we're working on to do, and hopefully over the course of the next year, with things getting back to normal, we can do more of those things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, kale's one of those things that people either love or hate, but I
Right.
believe olive oil and onion make many, many things better, including kale.
Absolutely.
So,
And a little garlic.
Yes. So, I know we're in the midst of COVID right now, and so this will, I'm sure, play into your answer, but, given what you do and what you're dealing with, the situations that you're dealing with, not only with people's lives and nutrition and well-being, but also the planet. Tell me what your state of mind is. I mean, are you feeling optimistic, or sometimes does it just really get you down?
I can't let the COVID situation get me down, because each and every day is a challenge for all of us that we don't waste. I tell you that we have 14 staff right now. Well, let me make sure the numbers are right. 8 of the staff are on our operations side, and they're working 5 days a week. And so they work hard. We've provided them with all the PPE that we can in order to protect them, and they do a really good job at that. But they're challenged each and every day, because it's hard work. Imagine being on a truck for a good 6-8 hours a day, and you're up and down, and you're loading and unloading. You're having to deal with pallets that will weigh anywhere from 3,500 to 4,000 pounds, using heavy equipment. So I have a great deal of respect for them. And then my administrative staff is basically working at home, because we have a couple people that have issues that felt uncomfortable, so we made it attractive for them, or easy for them. I don't know about attractive, but easy for them to work from home. And it's worked really well. So I'm optimistic, as far as We Don't Waste goes, that we can continue to operate. During this whole period of time, we have not lost one single day, even to inclement weather with our mobile food markets. We've never had to shut down a mobile market because of inclement weather. We work really hard to operate those things. The staff does an incredible job of preparing and executing. So I get upset, I guess would be the word, or discouraged, because of the fact that so many people out there don't realize that this is a serious, serious disease. And every time you think, well, I don't have to do this, I don't have to wear a mask, or I don't have to be socially distant, you're not impacting yourself. You're impacting all those people around you. And so when my staff goes out to work at a mobile market, they take all these extra precautions to make sure that they're not hopefully being infected by the disease. But it's discouraging that so many people don't recognize how important it is to follow what the CDC and other sciences and doctors are recommending. But I'm optimistic that we can continue to provide the service to our community that we have been for the last 11 years, and improve it each and every day, and in the future make it even better than it is today.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said what you did about the masks, as that's, it's so frustrating to me. This didn't have to be this bad, and it doesn't have to. It could be over a lot sooner if everybody did do the simple, very easy things that they need to do. But tell us you talked a little bit about what your volunteers do, but for our listeners and our readers, after having listened to this podcast, and I am going to assume being really impacted by what you've said, what can they do to help you now?
Well, I thank you, Courtney, for the opportunity. You asked the question of how we operate and where we get our funds. So it's really important that people visit our website, wedon'twaste.org, and look at the various tabs. And certainly we hope that they land on the one that says donate, because that's our lifeline. If we don't get dollars in, then we can't get food out. And we've been very successful in meeting the demands of people. So, 1, they can donate. Two, we certainly would like them to volunteer with us, and if they hit the drop-down tab on our website that says volunteer, then you can register, and we'll be happy to put you into our queue for volunteers, and you can work with us. People often say, well, I have food in my house. Can I donate it to you? No, you can't, unfortunately, because, we're protected by the Good Samaritan Act, which says so long as our provider does everything that's reasonable and necessary to maintain the integrity of the food, there's no liability. Well, we can do that with caterers. We can do that with restaurants, and we can do that with major producers, because they, in turn, are governed by the USDA and the Department of Health and the county health department, so we can ensure and we know that they're following the rules, as do we. We take temperatures, we have gauges, all of our cooler space is monitored, and so unfortunately, we would like to take food from individuals, but we can't guarantee just how that food has been maintained once it arrives home. So I hope that people understand that. So we'd ask that they visit our website, look at our social media channels. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on, what am I missing?
Instagram?
Instagram, yes. So visit us on all the social media channels. We'd be happy if you sign up to receive our newsletter on our website. Keep in touch with us and just follow us. It's important that people get to know just exactly what we do and how we do it, and that we're really out there to protect the public from food going to the landfill. But as important is the food that we recover each and every day is destined for people that are food insecure and most vulnerable. We're going to close out this year probably with having recovered over 23 million servings of food.
Wow.
So that's a lot of food that we're keeping, one, out of the landfill, but more importantly, we're putting it into the bellies of people.
That's just incredible. Before we sign off, I want to remind everyone that if you've enjoyed this podcast, and I hope you have, you can subscribe to the In Good Taste Denver podcast and learn about all sorts of organizations and companies and events and just various things going on in Colorado. And that's available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and a variety of other podcast listening services that we'll also link to in the article. But Arlan, thank you so much, not only for joining me today and for telling us more about We Don't Waste, but thank you for all that you do and all that your staff and volunteers do. It's really moving and it's educational and it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing that you do. So thank you.
Well, I certainly appreciate the time, Courtney, to talk with you and your audience. And it really is most helpful to the public to better understand just how important it is to recover food and to keep it out of the landfill. And the bottom line is, food is best used in the bellies of people and not in the landfill. So on behalf of We Don't Waste and all of our supporters, my staff, I want to thank you and wish everyone a very happy holiday season. I don't know when this will be broadcast necessarily, but if it's past the holiday, I hope you enjoyed the holiday. I hope you'll continue to be safe and stay well. And don't forget, wear your mask.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Arlan.
Thank you.